So it's official, Jax is trans, and people are mad. So as long as I can remember, the Digital Circus fandom has been arguing and damn near killing each other over one simple question. Is Jax trans? And honestly, I didn't really care for most of the conversations. I didn't care. I didn't see any solid evidence of Jax being trans, so I didn't really have a stance on it. But upon looking back, there are subtle instances of Jax being a representation of that community. But that being said, the storytelling is so vague that it can fit any narrative. It can be a representation of any sort of person that has been oppressed and is using that oppression to excuse oppressing others. So it wasn't like it was all set in stone that Jax is a trans individual. And honestly, that seems very intentional, especially consider that most of the audience is gayered in the Republican National Convention. Now, while there's a lot of valid criticism towards the show and its vague morals and its sometimes problematic moments, the ambiguity of Jax's symbolism is what really hits home for me. The fact that so many people can interpret Jax's arc as a trans allegory, a queer allegory, a toxic masculinity allegory, or all of the above. That's what really resonates with me and other people that at least try to understand Jax as an individual. So yes, while I am the biggest Jax hater because that irredeemable piece of shit killed the only baddie that was in the circus, aka Ribbit's fat ass, I still try to understand his character. And all in all, yeah, his character is basically just Lars from Steven Universe, but written badly, you know. And side note, Rebecca Sugar would have a field day with this. Let me just give praise to the goddess that is Rebecca Sugar. She would have made everybody in this circus redeemable. She would have made Kinger into the best character ever known to man. And don't even get me started on what she would have done with Gangle. Her whole story would have had me in tears and had me crying to my mama 5 times a week.
You got money problems.
But overall, the fandom is arguing over stuff that in retrospect means absolutely nothing. Half the fandom is arguing over pronouns when Gooseworx herself said that Jax uses he and she pronouns. So yeah, that's a waste of time. While the other half is arguing whether this is an incredibly lazy self-insert that is there just to excuse Jax's actions. And while there's just the tiniest bit of validity that goes to both viewpoints, I feel like the fandom is missing the core theme in all of this that has both negative and positive implications. From the more sane sections of this community, people are addressing the core themes with Jax being trans or trans film coded. And a lot of the discourse is about whether the finale attaches that identity to one of the most morally rotten characters of the show. Because Jax is not just a dickhead. He's abusive, he manipulates people, he humiliates people, he targets vulnerable characters and causes them to abstract. And if abstraction is basically the show's version of ending yourself, then Jax's actions are reprehensible. And to many people, the show is tying the most explicit trans-coded storyline to a character who spends the series pushing other people towards destruction. But in my opinion, that does not automatically make the writing offensive. It just makes the writing more complex. This is a story about self-hatred. It's about trauma. It's about toxic masculinity and being in the closet. It's about all these toxic themes. And having a character like Jax who's trans-coded and represents all of these concepts, that's where a different sort of representation comes in. Because not all representation has to be completely positive representation. Sometimes it can be tragic. Sometimes it can show the real deal of what goes on in people's heads when they can't be themselves. Now, while some people like myself are reading Jax as a tragic representation, other people are reading him as a terrible representation, and honestly, both sides have a point.
I don't want to hear it. She's a misogynist. Oh, Rosetta, not every trans character has to be perfect 100% of the time. No one said that. In fact, that's a huge problem I have with representation. For example, I'm black, and sometimes I can tell when authors who are not black are afraid of mischaracterizing their black characters or being racist, so they make the character overly perfect and play it safe in order to avoid that. But what that does, playing it safe, ultimately makes for a boring character who falls short in comparison to the other characters who are allowed to be complex. So no, Jax should not have to be perfect just because she's trans. But she should not be a red pill stereotype who fulfills every negative trans femme stereotype I've ever seen in my life. She hits other women. She sneaks into women's bedrooms. She daydreams about harassing them. Like I said, if this is a representation that you want, That's not good. And as a woman who will always support my trans femme, this makes me abundantly uncomfortable. She does nothing but harm other women. Even if she were a cis girl, that's still not a good representation of women. She should not be called lovely. Isn't she lovely? No! She is not a girl's girl. She does nothing but harm other women who have done nothing to her. This is a badly written female character in all sense of the word.
Because yes, trans characters are allowed to be flawed. They are allowed to be villains. They are allowed to be messy, cruel, selfish, and complicated. But when one of your only major trans-coded characters is also written as an abusive, self-destructive person who hurts everyone around her, writing has to be extremely careful. And honestly, I don't think the finale fully earns that level of complexity. Because yes, the idea is interesting, the emotion is there, the symbolism is there, but ultimately the execution is very messy. Especially since Jax's singular arc overtakes 90% of the other characters' arcs in this one episode. So yeah, I understand people not liking this representation all that much. And I think a lot of the criticism towards Jax being trans stems from the fact that Jax's assholery is a lot of the time pushed aside, excused, or even ignored and capitalized on, because now looking back on the Jax made merch, it's kind of fucked up seeing that they basically capitalize on Jax having body dysmorphia.
If Jax getting upset over the maid costume in episode 5 was supposed to be internalized transphobia, why did they capitalize off of it so much? Why make countless products of what is supposed to be a trans woman struggling to accept herself? This isn't me denying Jax being trans. This is me pointing out the abhorrent way in which it was handled. Now that we have solid confirmation that that was the intention, seeing products and gags all throughout the show about it that are meant to be comedic is really disheartening. Now, I know Goose is a trans woman, which is fine, of course, but it doesn't automatically mean that Jax is well-written representation. Throughout the show, Jax has been a bully to all the female characters, has hated being seen as feminine, and is a manipulator and a liar who we're expected to feel bad for. Jax is not a victim, and confirming Jax is trans after the show ended is such a disservice to every trans individual in the audience.
But let me harken back to what Gooseworx said about Jax's overall character. So to Gooseworx, Jax is basically a self-insert for all of her most horrible qualities. So Gooseworx as a trans individual is basically showcasing all of the repressed emotions, identity issues, and abuse and evil behavior that was inside of them all along, and putting it on a platform for the rest of the world to see. And my God, Gooseworx, we need to get you some free therapy, girl. So yeah, Jax's character overall was not done justice in the finale, because even though the finale focused heavily on him, I would say that that worked to his detriment, because all within the same episode, they want us to understand him while pitying him and condemning him all at the same time. And that's a lot to ask for in one rushed ass finale. So my issue is not the interpretation. My issue is the storytelling responsibility that comes with that, because Jax being trans could have been powerful, Jax being awful could have been powerful, but putting both together without enough breathing room creates a problem the finale does not fully solve, which leads to the audience either excusing his heinous actions or others reading the finale as hatred for trans individuals. So yeah, overall, Jax is not a misunderstood hero, he's not a mastermind, he's not secretly justified because he had a rough childhood. Jax is a deeply damaged person who spent years turning his pain into everyone else's problem. And that's what makes him compelling. He's sympathetic in a way, he's understandable, he's tragic, but he's also a genuinely awful person. And the fact that all four of those can be true at the same time is what makes Jax one of the most interesting characters Gooseworx has written in the series. The only problem is we get too much of it. Like, holy shit, 90% of the finale was just Jax. It was Jax the movie, guys. Alright, I think I'm done. Bye.
Waiting. I've been sitting here waiting on you. Waiting.